The Miracle Worker. In 1962's The Miracle Worker, disability wasn't a subplot, it was the engine driving the entire film. Based on the life of Helen Keller, the story centers on a deafblind child and her breakthrough into language, led by her fiercely determined teacher, Annie Sullivan. Anne Bancroft and Patty Duke, reprising their Broadway roles, delivered performances so intense that the now famous dining room scene reportedly left them bruised. That scene alone stretched over 8 minutes and took nearly a week to shoot, without stunt doubles. Director Arthur Penn refused to stage anything gently, pushing for raw physicality and emotional grit. The film's unfiltered portrayal of disability and perseverance stunned audiences and critics alike. Bancroft won Best Actress, while Duke, at just 16, became the youngest competitive Oscar winner at the time. Some film historians credit the movie with sparking broader public awareness around disability education. While legends suggest its success influenced funding toward deafblind support programs in the 1960s, no clear paper trail confirms it. Still, The Miracle Worker left a mark far beyond the screen, turning a personal triumph into a cultural flashpoint. Johnny Belinda. In 1948, Warner Brothers released Johnny Belinda, a film that broke more than one rule without ever saying a word, literally. Jane Wyman played Belinda, a deaf and mute woman living in rural Nova Scotia, and her silent performance earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress. The first time in Oscar history, the honor went to a nonverbal role. The film's plot was even more provocative. Belinda, ostracized by her community, becomes the victim of a violent act, territory the motion picture production code aggressively avoided. Yet Johnny Belinda navigated the restrictions with stark visuals and emotional restraint, managing to depict trauma without violating the code's letter. Wyman reportedly trained with technical advisors and learned simplified sign language for the role, a level of preparation uncommon at the time. Some film historians argue the cinematography, marked by wide, desolate shots, was deliberately used to mirror Belinda's isolation. The film became both a box office hit and a critical success, but not everyone embraced it. Several countries banned it outright, citing its sensitive content. There's even a persistent rumor that studio executives initially resisted greenlighting the project, fearing backlash from censors and conservative audiences. Whether true or not, Johnny Belinda carved out a legacy as one of the few Golden Age dramas that dared to center a disabled character with dignity, complexity, and strength. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. In 1939, RKO Radio Pictures released The Hunchback of Notre Dame, casting Charles Laughton as Quasimodo in a rare display of empathy for a physically different character during Hollywood's golden age. Departing from the era's usual grotesque stereotypes, Laughton's Quasimodo was tragic, yet deeply human, tender, conflicted, and painfully aware of his isolation. Film historian Richard Schickel later described Laughton's performance as unsettling and revolutionary, bringing a dignity to the role that challenged audiences in a decade dominated by escapist musicals and comedies. The transformation was grueling, with Laughton enduring hours of prosthetic makeup by Perk Westmore, whose designs pushed the boundaries of what was possible at the time, reportedly leaving Laughton nearly blind and raw-skinned from repeated applications. RKO's commitment to authenticity extended to constructing a massive Notre Dame facade on the studio lot, involving hundreds of artisans. While critics were divided, the New York Times praised Laughton's pathos, but cautioned that the film's somber tone might alienate audiences. The film resonated, grossing several $1 million during the waning years of the Great Depression and earning Academy Award nominations for Best Original Score and Best Sound. Some speculate that Laughton's own insecurities about his appearance lent his Quasimodo an added vulnerability, resulting in one of Hollywood's earliest portrayals of a physically deformed character that prioritized emotion and humanity over spectacle. Bright Victory. In 1951, Universal International released Bright Victory, a film that defied many of its era's cinematic norms by casting a recently blinded World War II veteran as its lead. Arthur Kennedy took on the role of Sergeant Larry Nevins, a soldier adjusting not just to the trauma of war, but to the sudden loss of sight, a condition rarely explored with such nuance in Golden Age Hollywood. Director Mark Robson employed a then uncommon visual technique, point-of-view shots mimicking the protagonist's blindness. While earlier films had experimented with first-person perspectives, Robson's approach stood out for its focus on sensory disorientation, using sound and silence to deepen the emotional impact. The Academy recognized Kennedy's performance with a nomination for Best Actor. The film also picked up a nomination for Best Sound Recording, appropriate recognition for a story that leaned heavily on auditory storytelling. Critics like Bosley Crowther of the New York Times applauded the film's restraint, calling it a quietly powerful account of inner struggle. Yet not all feedback was glowing. Some disability advocates later argued that the narrative leaned too heavily on the trope of personal triumph, glossing over broader social challenges. Despite this, Bright Victory is often cited as a stepping stone toward more layered portrayals of disability in cinema, influencing later works throughout the Golden Age and beyond. The best years of our lives. In 1946, Hollywood handed a major role to a man who had never acted and had no hands. Harold Russell, a World War II veteran who lost both hands in a training accident, portrayed Homer Parrish in The Best Years of Our Lives. Director William Wyler spotted Russell in an Army training film called Diary of a Sergeant and insisted on casting him, despite studio concerns. A non-actor with visible amputations was seen as a commercial gamble. But Wyler pushed back. He wanted authenticity, not prosthetics, not performance. Russell initially hesitated, fearing exploitation, but agreed after Wyler assured him of the film's sincerity. His performance was understated, raw, and groundbreaking for the era. He lit cigarettes, navigated romance, and tied shoelaces using prosthetic hooks on camera. The Academy responded with 2 Oscars, one for Best Supporting Actor and one honorary award for inspiring fellow veterans. Some speculate the dual recognition was the Academy's way of honoring him without fully disrupting Hollywood norms. Either way, it was unprecedented. Russell remains the only person to win 2 Oscars for the same role. The film became the highest-grossing release of 1946 and won 7 Academy Awards. Russell later led the President's Committee on Employment of the Handicapped and rarely returned to acting. In an industry that often hid or villainized disability, his role marked a rare moment of visibility, and a quiet revolution in how disability could be portrayed on screen. The Enchanted Cottage. Released in May of 1945, just weeks before the end of World War II in Europe, The Enchanted Cottage stood out for its restrained portrayal of physical and emotional trauma. Robert Young played a disfigured war veteran whose injuries were never overtly shown, an intentional choice that shifted focus from spectacle to substance. Dorothy McGuire portrayed a woman considered socially awkward and physically plain, creating a parallel between visible and invisible wounds. Director John Cromwell avoided heavy prosthetics, instead using subtle lighting and nuanced performances to suggest transformation. The film's central metaphor, a mysterious cottage that reflects its occupant's inner beauty, was more than just a plot device. Some film scholars argue it tapped into a national undercurrent, the emotional reintegration of wounded veterans returning home. Contemporary critics praised the film's sincerity. The New York Times reportedly called it a tender and touching parable, a rare accolade for a film that avoided melodrama. Still, some speculate its understated tone may have limited its box office reach. Whether true or not, the film's legacy has endured, quietly but meaningfully. Unlike many of its era, The Enchanted Cottage didn't treat disability as a narrative obstacle. It treated it as part of life, deserving of empathy, dignity, and love. The Snake Pit. In 1948, The Snake Pit jolted Hollywood out of its comfort zone. At a time when mental illness was either ignored or cartoonishly exaggerated on screen, this film put psychological disability front and center. Olivia de Havilland portrayed Virginia Cunningham, a woman institutionalized after a mental collapse. Critics hailed her performance as raw and restrained, earning her another Academy Award nomination and helping the film secure 6 nominations in total, including Best Picture. Director Anatol Litvak wasn't interested in sanitizing the subject. He toured real psychiatric hospitals, consulted with psychiatrists, and insisted on depicting actual treatments used in the 1940s: electroconvulsive therapy, hydrotherapy, and insulin shock. These weren't plot devices, they were standard practice. Adapted from Mary Jane Ward's semi-autobiographical novel, the film drew directly from her time in a state hospital. That authenticity hit a nerve. Mental health organizations praised its realism, and public response was overwhelming. Some lawmakers even cited the film during mental health reform debates in states like New York and California. The phrase "snake pit," already in circulation, took on new weight after the film's release. it became shorthand for any chaotic, dehumanizing institution. Despite its progressive stance, some scholars argue it leaned too heavily on Freudian psychoanalysis. Still, in an era when most films sidestep mental illness entirely, The Snake Pit carved out a place in history as one of the first American movies to treat psychological disability not as a gimmick, but as a human condition. Freaks. In 1932, MGM released Freaks, a film so provocative, it was banned in the United Kingdom until 1963. Directed by Todd Browning, a former carnival worker, the film featured actual sideshow performers like Harry Earls, Johnny Eck, and conjoined twins Daisy and Violet Hilton in leading roles. At a time when disability on screen was often reduced to prosthetics or caricature, Browning's casting choice was both unprecedented and deeply personal. The plot flipped the moral compass. The so-called freaks were portrayed as dignified and loyal, while the able-bodied characters, most notably the manipulative trapeze artist Cleopatra, embodied cruelty and exploitation. Test audiences reportedly recoiled, and MGM slashed over 30 minutes from the film, including a now-lost ending rumored to be far more disturbing. Marketed as horror, the film bombed commercially, and MGM quickly pulled it from circulation. Browning's career never recovered. Still, decades later, critics began to reframe Freaks as a subversive pre-code drama that challenged societal norms. Its infamous one of us" chant has since echoed through everything from punk rock to pop culture satire. Some disability advocates hail it as a rare early example of authentic representation, while others argue its shock value undermines its message. Either way, Freaks remains one of the most controversial and unforgettable films of Hollywood's golden age. The Spiral Staircase. Released in 1946 by RKO Pictures, The Spiral Staircase defied Hollywood convention by centering its story on a mute protagonist, played by Dorothy McGuire. In an era that prized dialogue, McGuire's nearly wordless performance as Helen, a domestic worker targeted by a killer preying on women deemed imperfect, was a bold narrative risk. Through expressive silence and restrained physicality, she conveyed a powerful range of fear, confusion, and determination, earning praise from film historian Jeanine Basinger as a masterclass in nonverbal acting. Despite critical acclaim and the film's commercial success, McGuire's performance was notably overlooked by the Academy, a snub still discussed by film historians. Director Robert Siodmak, drawing on his expressionist roots, heightened the film's tension with shadow-laden visuals, skewed camera angles, and claustrophobic close-ups. The Spiral Staircase itself became a potent symbol of psychological entrapment, with standout sequences that warped the frame to reflect Helen's disorientation and dread. The film's innovative sound design, marked by sparse music and deliberate silences, transformed Helen's voicelessness into a source of suspense and narrative strength. Today, The Spiral Staircase is recognized as a precursor to modern psychological horror and stands out as one of the earliest Golden Age films to place a disabled woman at its emotional center, not as a mere plot device, but as the heart of the story. A Patch of Blue. Released in 1965, A Patch of Blue broke ground not just for its depiction of blindness, but for daring to pair disability with one of Hollywood's most taboo subjects at the time, interracial connection. At the heart of the film is Selena Darcy, a blind working-class teenager played by Elizabeth Hartman in her first major role. Selena's world is one of isolation, shaped by both her disability and the abuse she endures at home. Her only escape comes in the form of Gordon Ralph, portrayed by Sidney Poitier, a compassionate and educated black man who offers her kindness in a city park. Their quiet friendship, tinged with romantic undertones, was considered incendiary at the time. Some Southern theaters reportedly removed scenes or refused to screen the film altogether. Shelley Winters, cast as Selena's bigoted and violent mother, won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. Critics were split. Some praised her fearless commitment, others felt the performance veered into grotesque exaggeration. Hartman reportedly prepared for the role by learning Braille and spending time with blind individuals to better understand their lived experience. Despite her breakout success, Hartman's career faded in the following decades. She reportedly battled severe depression and withdrew from public life. On June 10, 1987, she died by self-inflicted means at the age of 43. Her performance in A Patch of Blue remains a haunting reminder of a moment when Hollywood, however briefly, allowed the margins to take center stage. King's Row. King's Row shocked audiences in 1942 with Ronald Reagan's unforgettable line, "Where's the rest of me?" A moment so powerful it became the title of his 1965 autobiography. The film, adapted from Henry Belleman's controversial 1940 novel, originally hinted that Drake McHugh's double amputation was a cruel act of revenge by a vindictive doctor. While the novel exposed the town's genteel facade as a cover for corruption and malice, the film's early drafts reportedly made these motives explicit until the Production Code Office intervened. Censors demanded the removal of any clear suggestion that Dr. Gordon acted out of spite or incompetence, leaving just enough ambiguity in the final cut to keep audiences speculating. Released just weeks after America's entry into World War II, King's Row resonated with its raw depiction of sudden disability and emotional collapse. Reagan's performance, often overshadowed by his later political career, was praised at the time for its vulnerability and depth, an unexpected turn from an actor known for lighter roles. Some film historians argue that the film was one of the few from Hollywood's golden age to portray disability with genuine complexity, avoiding caricature. While Reagan's Hollywood legacy would soon be eclipsed by his political ascent, his role in King's Row remains a landmark in cinematic portrayals of trauma and resilience. The Men. In 1950, Fred Zinnemann directed a film that defied Hollywood norms and quietly rewrote the rules for disability on screen. The Men featured Marlon Brando in his first starring film role as Ken Wilczek, a World War II lieutenant left paraplegic by a combat injury. Unlike the era's typical portrayals, where disability was either symbolic or sidelined, this story put it front and center. Brando, then a rising Broadway actor, reportedly spent weeks living among paraplegic veterans at a California hospital, studying their routines, frustrations, and emotional scars. Some film historians even point to this role as the unofficial birth of Brando's method acting style. The screenplay, written by Carl Foreman, who would soon be blacklisted during the McCarthy era, refused to sugarcoat the trauma. In a move that was nearly unheard of at the time, Zinnemann and producer Stanley Kramer cast real disabled veterans in supporting roles. That decision added a layer of authenticity, but also made the film a tough sell. Critics praised it. The New York Times called Brando's performance extraordinarily powerful, but audiences weren't ready for a film that offered no easy redemption arc. Though it stumbled commercially, the film's legacy has only grown. Today, it's recognized as a groundbreaking moment in cinematic portrayals of disability, one that arrived decades before Hollywood was ready to follow its lead. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.